So we're possibly testing the sound again.
Earlier this morning, I had an aha moment of, I was born and raised for the most part in the Netherlands. And for centuries, we Dutchlanders have created best management practices about how to tame wild rivers and make them straight lines so that we can transport goods, produce and container ships and you name it. We dug canals, we drained swamps. When we ran out of space, we converted part of the sea and the ocean to land that we can now live on. And then when we started to run out of activities to do of taming water, I was looking at this slide earlier this morning from the Open Lands from Gerald Adelman, and I saw all of these swamps around Chicago. And my ancestors came in, and perhaps my grandfather even knew some of them, and said, we know what to do with these swamps. We can help you out. And I find it ironic that at the conferences that I attend during the year, usually within the first few minutes, I somehow engage in sometimes hefty debates in which I am defending why it does matter to have habitat on a straight line, why it does matter to have thriving ecosystems on rights of way. And it's always about why. And earlier when it was mentioned that this particular group, the question is no longer why, but the question is how. How can we create thriving ecosystems on linear lines in a non-linear environment? And so it's kind of a breath of fresh air to come here and enjoy coming here and collaborating in an open source across industries. It's almost like with this biodiversity we stand, you know. And I think it's rubbing off. I think the conversations that we're having in this room is rubbing off in other organizations in a very positive way. And this morning I'll give you a quick update on all that took place and that happened within the Utility Arborists Association just this last year alone. And the Utility Arborists Association is an association of over 5,000 members. They mainly cater to the utilities, both gas and electrics, and then specifically to the vegetation management department in the utilities, and then specifically to the vegetation managers managing habitat on the rights of way. And the Utility Arborists Association earlier this year adopted a new core value. And the new core value they adapted was environmental sustainability. So the effect that that has for this organization, or association I should say, is the current core value reads, it's a culture of safety, it's a culture of environmental sustainability, and it's a culture of operational excellence. And that's the foundation of their vision and their mission. They adopted this earlier this year, and immediately a task force within the UAA was formed to help and assist the UAA to cultivate and create that culture of environmental sustainability within their association. And the task force set out and started to run around and do a lot of activities. One of the activities we did was create an inspirational video to put pride and ownership back in the profession of a vegetation manager. You impact so many acres of linear land, and we wanted to reinstate and reinforce that you can take the pride and ownership and be proud of the work that you do by implementing the best sequence of best management practices, creating thriving habitats. So we might show this video over lunch, or are we going to give it a... We can try it. So it looks like your challenge that Iris gave you of meeting 3 people is going to be condensed, because at lunch we'll be showing this, and I want all of your attention. The video went over well. It was shown and shared at the Trees of Utilities in Omaha early in August. It then was shared last month in the Right-of-Way Symposium 12, Environmental Right-of-Way Symposium in Denver. It's currently on the UAA website. It's on their YouTube channel. It's free and available for all of us to use in conversations and to share. If you want to have an internal conversation of moving forward into creating thriving ecosystems, and this could be a tool for you to use to share with colleagues in upper management. The video was well received, and the task force was asked or tasked to create a second video in 2019 addressing the pollinators. You will see that this video was very industry specific. The next video on pollinators will be more for the general public at large, including utilities, but also their customer based. Upper management, customers, crews, and vegetation managers. Another activity that the Utility Arbors Association Task Force set out to do was similar to what the IOD, the DOT earlier shared this morning as a survey. We said, okay, where is the industry currently in terms of environmental stewardship, environmental sustainability, and how can we assist you in promoting this as a culture within the association? The blackout of 2003 truly created a culture of having vegetation away from power lines. It was federally regulated. There is a mentality and a culture that is currently present that we have to be in structural compliance. Vegetation was a cause of the outage that took place. So the industry is heavily focused on structural compliance and structural best management practices, where you have the clear edges, the clean floors by either mowing or spraying. And we asked the industry, are you ready to focus beyond compliance? Compliance meaning meeting all of the rules and regulations of NERC and FERC. And are you prepared to adopt more ecologically oriented best management practices instead of structurally oriented best management practices, where you take the ecology and the thriving ecosystems that are compatible into consideration and not negatively impact them when you implement work that needs to be done? I'm sharing with you the preliminary results. There are so far 20 utilities that responded, and we asked them if they were a co-op, a municipality, or an investor-owned utility. If they submitted their responses under other, then it's either a contracting arborist or a consultant working for a vegetation department within a utility. We asked them, does your department receive upper management support to implement environmental and sustainable right-of-way vegetation management practices? Do you get the support that you need? And it was almost 80% actually indeed. It says no, not currently, somewhat, it's on their radar, and yes, cautiously. So this indicates to us that as a task force, we can help and assist, perhaps lowering that hurdle and looking for ways to do that. Then we asked them, is your organization in a position, are you even in a position to manage your right-of-way vegetation beyond compliance? Can we work with you and focus on the thriving ecosystems? 30% said no, my organization is currently not there yet. We're still trying to meet the NERC and FERC regulations and compliance rules. The rest said managing is possible in those parts that are in compliant, or yes, we are currently doing it, or yes, we're doing it system-wide. So a fairly high percentage is ready to move beyond compliance. Then we ask them, if you rank the top hurdles to overcome in order to manage for thriving ecosystems, top hurdles that we gave them was to get proper upper management buy-in, if they have enough access to knowledge and experience, in terms of the shrubs and herbaceous plants. Most of the vegetation planning is being done by arborists. If we want to manage for herbaceous landscapes, then everything lower than a shrub is not really the specialty of an arborist. So we're looking at, do we have the knowledge available to write prescriptions for herbaceous, pollinator-rich, biodiverse, low-growing plant communities? Do we have a hurdle of communicating new technologies, some of that which we're developing here and are being looked at? Do we have a lack of ecologically oriented best management practices? Have we lost sight of them? Are we constantly focusing too much on the structurally oriented BMPs? Is it a cultural mindset? The last 15 years, did we tell ourselves this is what a right-of-way should look like? And is that a hurdle that you're up against? Or is it a perceived higher cost? We asked them to rank them, and all of them turned out to be pretty large and substantial hurdles. 2 stood out: to get proper upper management buy-in and to perceive higher cost. So if we combine those and if we work with that, then I think it's conducive if the task force is taking an extra another look at the sustainable indexes. If we can make an impact or change or play within the sustainable indexes and therefore directly tie it to Wall Street and to the investors, I think we can get buy-in from upper management and deal with the question of perceived higher cost. Earlier this year, the largest investment company in the world, BlackRock, reached out to the utility industry asking them, can you share with us your environmental, social, and government information? We've also seen an increase in the investment asset grown to over 30% in just 2 years. So it's setting a trend. And the ESG index scores, EEI jumped on board, developed a template, and I think Amaron responded, We Energy, AEP, who else is here in the room that went through this labor-intensive exercise. This index is pretty much designed for investors around the world to judge their risk. How risky is it to invest in your utility? How well are you positioned to be here in the next 15, 20, 30 years in terms of positioning your company in a sustainable future and a sustainable direction forward? That which was addressed earlier this morning as well. So managing for natural resources can play an increasingly important role impacting and informing sustainable indexes. And currently, I think it was mentioned yesterday, the GRE, or the Jones Sustainable Index, you know, they do have some metrics on there in terms of the acreage of habitat that is being managed, but then there's not really a direct tie-in to what that managed acreage might look like, you know, in reality. And hopefully, who knows, tier 1, 2, and 3 of the metrics and target group could perhaps play a role in that in the future. It's a complicated topic, but I think worth revisiting and increasingly becoming more important. There are other activities that the task force is focusing on. Unfortunately, we have grown in number quite a bit. Marla recently joined the task force, as did Josiane. Phil from CNUC has been on it since the conception of the task force, and there are over a dozen other companies and consultants involved. And these are just a few of the items that the task force is going to address and look at in the future. A few I will highlight. We're completely entirely going to update the website on the UAA to have an environmental sustainability section that they can go to as vegetation managers. We are starting to organize environmental summits. The first one is planned for 2020. And we are starting to create more business cases for the secondary ecological benefits on rights of way. So all of these activities took place just this last year alone. So I think we're heading in the right direction, and I think a lot of it came from conversations that were spin-offs from the working group that we have here. Yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Crystal clear?
Stan, just real quick, on the sustainability piece, you had the chart up there with the numbers. Could you just explain what those numbers represented? I didn't quite catch that.
Statistics, my favorites. This chart right here?
No, the one where you, I think, go forward.
Forward.
No, you're going backwards. Okay. Yeah, there.
This one. This one came from between 2014 and 2016, the US saw a substantial increase in sustainable reporting investment asset growth from 6 trillion to 8 trillion. So if you look at all of the investments, they're teamed in different categories. And the category of moving monetary funds from the asset companies that are investing on Wall Street, the percentage that they're starting to move into the sustainable sector in the industry. Then the question is, what is sustainable, right? So the ESG that was developed by the United Nations in 2005 is trying to have a difficult to quantify index because it's very hard to put numbers at an ESG score. Although it was found that investors investing in industries got burned with their investments or the stock market tanked because, for example, there was negative name recognition of certain companies around the world that didn't use the right practices to produce clothes and ship them around, other parts of the world, and that came in the news, and therefore there's a negative impact on their stock value. So with the ESG, they're trying to prevent or capture their risk. They're trying to look at the risk. What risk do we have investing in AEP moving forward? Is it going to be a liability that if there is a lot of brownout or burned out rights of way or neglect of vegetation or perhaps misuse of vegetation management treatment, is that going to be a negative perception for public image? If so, how can we quantify it? And if it is quantifiable, how can we prevent that from happening so that you can become part of that sustainable investment?
Right, okay, no, that's a really good explanation.
Yeah.
And just for the audience's benefit, these things really matter. And the one thing that companies want to avoid more than anything is a stakeholder resolution regarding an issue like that. So, thanks, Dan, appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
One more question?
Being an arborist, would you know if there are any trees or which trees provide pollinator habitats?
A ton. Yeah, there are many. One of the best pollinators actually are shrubs. And this cannot be stated enough. Shrubs on transmission lines very often are very compatible. And there are plenty of regional, eco-specific regional field guides for shrubs, native shrubs. So to repeat Dr. Talamy, who spoke to here before, you know, a non-native tree, a ginkgo, was not compatible, but can support one insect species. A native shrub oak can support 99 species of insects. And it takes an insect about 900 years to get comfortable with an invasive plant. But there are a lot of there are a lot of native shrubs that insects use for pollinators. And, you know, all the way from the witch hazel in the end of the growing season, or the first one to bloom before winter, you know, all the way to the service berries and the mountain laurels, and you name it, all throughout the season. And shrubs are not often enough looked at, in my opinion, as very good pollinators, and that they're compatible on transmission right-of-ways. Thank you.
Thanks.